Hello there. I bet our ECHR loving lefty luvvies will be giving this one a good stiff ignoring. But I challenge them to condemn France for doing this. It's a matter for France, our lefty luvvies will say, while demanding that the UK takes up their moral high ground and shows France how to behave where human rights are concerned. France is about to do that heinous thing of breaking so-called international law by flouting the European Convention on Human Rights, by expelling what they see as dangerous foreigners prior to their court appeals being heard by the Strasbourg human rights courts. And further, if France is fined by the European Courts of Human Rights, they will just pay the fine and refuse to let those people back into the country, says the French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin. Now, were the UK to declare such a thing, the lefty lawfare types and the Supreme Court would be gearing up to give the UK government a right good kicking. And Darmanin has tabled legislation to get this done, together with extending the amount of time someone can be held in detention before charges are brought. All designed to claw back some centre-right voters, it seems. After all, the National Rally leader Marine Le Pen does seem to be more popular than the incumbent Emmanuel Macron at the moment. In fact, last June she saw a massive surge in the polls. I have the impression of a tsunami advancing, said one of Macron's MPs, Jacqueline Maquet. But the French Interior Minister's boss, President Macron, is as big a Europhile as you would ever meet. And thumbing the nation's nose at the ECHR is not a good European thing to do, is it? No, it's avidly populist. So I wonder what our homegrown UK EU fanatics will make of it when they hear that an EU member state is going to flout this international law ECHR thing. Remember, when the UK government was just thinking about doing such a thing, the left went into utter meltdown. But I'll tell you exactly what the left will do here. They'll ignore it. They'll go childishly la 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 when people talk about it so they can't hear it. They won't ask or answer questions about it. In short, they won't engage with it. They will do the three monkeys. But this shows Macron's government is prepared to lurch to the right to get votes, trampling all over the human rights that the ECHR supposedly conveys to us. Another EU member state dabbling on the right wing of politics. Shock horror. How could anyone ever want to join such a right-wing anti-human rights organisation? And that's exactly why our rejoiner rabble will try and make out this isn't happening. Now, this also obviously goes against that much-treasured EU thing, the rule of law, something that member states like Hungary and Poland have fallen foul of. And Hungary had €6.3 billion of payments from the EU Commission suspended at the end of last year for not fully complying with the EU rule of law requirements. Message to all those rejoiner zealots out there. How can we possibly join an outfit that has so many members breaching its domestic and international rule of law requirements? Oh, sorry, I forgot. The rejoiner brigade isn't listening to that bit. They will not want to know about it. Anyway, what if France goes down this route and the Council of Europe, the body that runs the European Convention on Human Rights and the related courts, but crucially is not connected to the European Union, what if the Council of Europe decided to take its own action against France and maybe end up suspending their membership, or ultimately even throwing France out of the ECHR? Because if the French government ejects hundreds or even thousands of people from France on this basis, it will really be rubbing the ECHR judges' noses in the mire. It would be like paying endless parking and speeding tickets without losing your licence, and France can pay for a lot of those. So surely, after just a couple of examples of France ignoring ECHR rulings but just paying a fine, the ECHR judges would start to lose patience and increase those fines to punitive levels. After all, if they didn't do so, they would lose credibility in the eyes of the world. Not only that, I would assume there would be French citizens and non-governmental organisations who would try to get the French government itself into the dock at the ECHR for such antics. Even another EU member state might throw its hat into that particular ring. Who knows? But interestingly, the European Union itself, through the EU Commission, can't take France to the ECHR courts because the EU itself is not a signatory to the ECHR. Even though the Lisbon Treaty that was signed well over a decade ago requires the EU Commission, the EU Council, the EU Parliament, the EU Courts of Justice and all EU laws to accede to the ECHR. But it hasn't thus far done so, on the basis that the Commission and the ECJ would lose sovereignty to the ECHR. And sovereignty is extremely important to the EU machine, if you hadn't noticed. Anyway, suspending or rejecting France from the ECHR would cause a real storm, because membership of the ECHR is a requirement of being a member state of the European Union. You cannot be a member of the EU if you are not a signatory to the ECHR. So I doubt that would ever be allowed to happen, especially as it would put France in the same exclusive club as Russia and Belarus. And I'm sure that the French have done their due diligence to ensure that they are on firm ground here. But the ECHR does have the upper hand here, I would guess. So all this hot talk by the Interior Minister could possibly be shown up to be mere hot air, as the French are forced to drop those plans after the Council of Europe makes it clear who the boss is. You know, just like Sunak and his team have to drop all plans to deal with irregular migration, other than, of course, to let everyone in, let them do as they please, the UK to pay the bills and never deport them, whatever they get up to. Now, EU commissars gave the UK a lecture a few months ago telling us not to bypass the ECHR in order to get the Rwanda plan up and running. And one of those dishing out the lecture was the EU Commission Vice President Maros Šefčovič. But he is a member of the EU Commission that has still not itself acceded to the ECHR, as I pointed out earlier. What right has he to lecture us? We should just reply, we won't take human rights lectures of this sort from bodies that are not themselves signatories to the ECHR. But the fact that they did so says to me that the EU Commission will be giving France a good broadsiding to bring them into line. And if the EU commissars don't do that, then we can ignore them and the ECHR to ourselves. After all, what's good for the EU and France is surely good enough for the UK. Not only that, if we did ignore the ECHR courts, then maybe the UK would get kicked out, so ridding us of the problem of disentangling ourselves from it. Now, the lefty lovey pro-EU rejoiners would not like that, not one bit, because as I said, acceding to the ECHR is a requirement of joining the European Union.